Hello, I'm Nima Rajan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the federal government is sending $75 million to organizations that help Indigenous people living in urban areas and off reserves. The government had previously promised $15 million in funding for services such as counseling, health care, food, and supportive housing. More than 1 million Indigenous people live in cities or off reserves, according to the Prime Minister, and they deserve good services that are culturally appropriate. Well, as of this morning, there were 80,142 confirmed and presumptive cases of COVID-19 across the country, including 6,031 deaths. All of the cases in New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Yukon, and the Northwest Territories are listed as resolved. Several experts believe the ability to collect timely and accessible information about the pandemic has been a failure. Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Theresa Tam says you should not make assumptions about why some people aren't wearing face masks, and that deaf and hearing impaired Canadians may find the new COVID-19 era more challenging. As more people wear face masks to help prevent the spread of the virus, those who rely on reading lips could find their ability to communicate hampered. People's voices could also be muffled by the face coverings, making it harder for the hearing impaired to understand. The Alaska-based company Rapid Response PPE has developed face masks with clear shields so hearing impaired people can see facial cues and lip movement. The lack of public toilets across Canada was recently brought into focus by the COVID-19 pandemic. Limited access to washrooms became a hurdle for essential workers such as transit and truck drivers who could no longer rely on coffee shops and other businesses once they were ordered closed. Some Canadian cities, including Toronto and Ottawa, have installed temporary portable washrooms and hand washing stations to help offset the closure of commercial and civic spaces. The Manitoba Fitness Council wants the Manitoba government to follow BC's lead and allow gyms to reopen. The council says COVID-19 infection rates in the province are much lower than in BC. Stephanie Jeffrey, the executive director of the council, says the government has not given gyms clear information on when they can reopen their doors. The Manitoba government did not respond to a request for comment. The U.S. has notified Canada and the rest of its international partners that it is pulling out of the Open Skies Treaty. The treaty permits 34 nations to conduct unarmed observation flights over each other's territory and was set up to promote trust and avert conflict. The Trump administration claims that Russia is violating the treaty and says any images collected during the flights can be obtained quickly and at less cost via satellite. Meanwhile, the White House has issued a broad-scale attack on China focused on its economic policies, military buildup, disinformation campaigns, and human rights violations. The report does not signal a shift in U.S. policy. A senior official says the move expands on U.S. President Donald Trump's get tough position and may resonate with voters that are frustrated about China's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has left tens of millions of Americans out of work. Apple and Google have released long-awaited smartphone technology to automatically notify people if they might have been exposed to COVID-19. The companies say 22 countries and several U.S. states are already planning to build voluntary phone apps using their software. It relies on Bluetooth wireless technology to detect when someone who downloaded the app has spent time near another app user who later tests positive for the coronavirus. Lebanon's prime minister is warning of a major food crisis in the Mediterranean country, which is facing an unprecedented economic and financial crisis made worse by the coronavirus pandemic. In an opinion piece published in the Washington Post, Prime Minister Hassan Diab also warns of eventual starvation in the Middle East that he says may spark a new migration flow to Europe. He urges the United States and the European Union to establish a dedicated emergency fund to help the conflict-prone region. Prime Minister Diab says many Lebanese may soon find it difficult to afford even bread. A church in Holy Spring, Mississippi has been destroyed by a suspected arson fire about a month after its pastor filed a lawsuit challenging the city of Holy Springs on restrictions amid the coronavirus pandemic. Investigators found graffiti at the scene that read, quote, "Bet you stay home now, you hypocrites." The lawsuit alleges police officers disrupted a church Bible study and Easter service. A city attorney says nearly 40 parishioners weren't practicing social distancing inside the church when a violation citation was issued. A U.S. official says the Philippines has emerged as a global hotspot for online child sexual exploitation, and that coronavirus lockdowns may be worsening the abuses. A new study released by the Washington-based International Justice Mission says cases in the Philippines have increased sharply in recent years, with parents agreeing to have their own children victimized for the money. U.S. State Department official John Richmond, who oversees U.S. efforts to combat human trafficking, says the global coronavirus shutdown seems to be worsening the situation. The coasts of India and Bangladesh are flooded, and millions of people remain without power after the most powerful cyclone to hit the region in more than a decade left dozens dead and a trail of destruction. In the Indian city of Kolkata, home to more than 14 million people, large portions of the metropolis and its suburbs are underwater, including the city's main airport. When the storm made landfall, it lashed coastal areas in both India and Bangladesh with heavy rain, a battering storm surge, and sustained strong winds. A pair of American astronauts will soon end a 9-year launch drought for NASA as they hunker down at the Kennedy Space Center precisely 1 week before their historic SpaceX flight. NASA test pilots Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken arrived yesterday and are scheduled to blast off next Wednesday from the same pad where the space shuttle last soared in 2011, which was the last domestically crewed liftoff for the space agency. This time, a private company, SpaceX, is providing the lift and the capsule. Well, that'll do it for today's news update. I'm Nima Rajan. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.